Hello, guys. My name is Dewan Moore.
Episode 3, guys. Hello. Hard times in America. Today's topic is about African American youth, their struggles. We're going to talk about institutional racism, and we're going to talk about the school to prison pipeline, on how the kids out there is trying to survive just to make it, and how they're being nudged to go into jails and prisons because the schools are horrific. It's just horrible. What I'm suggesting, my name is Dewan Moore, is let's get the discussion going. Let's start talking about these issues. It's the only way we can resolve it and get healing. So what I'm advocating is let's change the laws and the policies in America's criminal justice system. We have to dismantle the old Jim Crow laws that's still haunting black youth in America. It's really sad and dark that our youth had to resort to washing windows in traffic just to support themselves financially in the streets of Baltimore and other streets in America, not just Baltimore. I'm asking America to grow up and say, come on, America. You know that the system is failing these kids and the system is broken. So my question to Hard Times in America is, how can we build and prepare these young kings for the future? Young queens for the future. How can we convert them into trendsetters, leaders, and how can we get them into programs that can entrench and nourish their soul, utilize their gifts and talents so they can get off the streets? I'm only one person with a voice that's crying out in the wilderness, seeking to destroy any evil forces that's trying to stop our kids from shining and turning into stars. The school to prison pipeline is very real. It's very real. Serious issues that needs to be addressed, and we need to talk about it and stop throwing it underneath the rug. Why are they building more prisons than schools? And the schools they are building or trying to revitalize is horrible, but they got high-tech prison systems that's amazing. You know, high-tech, concrete, hurricane-proof, rainstorm-proof. It's nice. Not to glamorize it, but if you put that same energy into a prison, why can't you put it in the school? That's the correlation I'm trying to make. Youth do make mistakes, but their whole life shouldn't be stuck in poverty for a minor criminal record. It's not happening in white America, so why is it happening in black America? So I'm asking Hard Times in America. I'm going to do a scenario. This is the picture I'm going to paint. Okay. Think of America as a boxer fighting another boxer. But the other boxer that America is fighting, which is the youth, has his hands tied behind his back. Everybody can see who's going to lose. They can even see that the opponent, aka the adversary, has the edge, which is America. So today, I pray that we can break the spirit of institutional racism to 30 pieces. Basically what Judas did to Jesus when he sold him out. But we know Jesus rose up from that. We know the story. And replace it with the spirit of unity, love, peace, and happiness. Youth, hear me out. Hear this. Please hear me. Listen wisely. You don't have to wait no more on a system or the powers that be to fix your issues. You can do it by yourself, brick by brick, piece by piece. We can learn from our past mistakes. We can make better choices. We can start building each one of us up. We can start teaching the youth how to have a trade, how to have the knowledge, the skills. They can make their own buildings. They can make their own jobs. They can create their own music, their own income. Stop waiting for the system to fix you. God will install a light inside of you. He will give you principles of favor and wisdom and knowledge. He will give you the insight to make the change that needs to happen. So I'm asking my youth to have the faith, believe in themselves, and eventually God will fight that good fight for them. Don't give up, youth. Keep your hands up and keep fighting. Being in the fire, sometimes you will get burned, but going through the fire, you're going to learn the lessons how to survive. It took Jesus to go into hell to get the keys so we can be free. So sometimes you got to walk through hell just to appreciate heaven. So getting back to the boxer. So being as though the boxer, which is America, and the other boxer, which is the youth, being as though his hands was tied behind his back, he couldn't win the fight. He couldn't be free. So unloosen them. Break the chains. Give the youth a chance to survive and make it. And stop giving them these criminalized records, these petty charges, and destroying their future. Because it's not going to be good for you, America, if you don't invest into your youth. All youth, but definitely especially the African American youth, because they really, really need the help. They really need the help. So, white America, if you're listening, please join us and help these youth get back on their feet. We need you as well. And God bless everybody. I love everybody. DeJuan Moore. I don't know who this message is going to reach, but whoever it goes to, come on, man. Let's help these kids out. Let's help them out. Peace and blessings. DeJuan Moore.
Passion and concern. I'm here to talk about criminals. And I'm here to talk about our criminal justice system. A system of mass incarceration, a penal system unprecedented in world history. Millions of people are locked up in the United States today. Overwhelmingly poor people and people of color, locked in literal cages, often treated worse than animals, and then upon their release, they're stripped of the basic civil and human rights supposedly won in the civil rights movement, like the right to vote, the right to serve on juries, and the right to be free of legal discrimination in employment, housing, access to education, and basic public benefits. So many of the old forms of discrimination that we supposedly left behind during the Jim Crow era are suddenly legal again once you've been branded a felon. That's why I now believe we have not truly ended racial caste in America. We've merely redesigned it. Now, I want to just admit at the outset that there was a time when I rejected this kind of talk out of hand. There was a time when I rejected comparisons between mass incarceration and slavery or mass incarceration and Jim Crow, and believed that people who made those kinds of claims and those kinds of comparisons were actually doing more harm than good to efforts to reform our criminal justice system or achieve greater racial equality in the United States. In fact, the first time I encountered the idea that our criminal justice system might be functioning like a caste system, I was living in Oakland, California, and I was rushing to catch the bus. And as I was hurrying down the street, there was this bright orange poster stapled to a telephone pole that caught my eye. And on it, it said in large bold print, "The drug war is the new Jim Crow." And I paused for a minute and scanned the text of the flyer, and I saw that some radical community group was holding a meeting several blocks away, and they were organizing to protest the new 3 strikes law in California, the expansion of the prison system, the drug war, racial profiling, police brutality. The list went on, and I stood there looking at the flyer thinking to myself, yeah, our criminal justice system may be biased in a lot of ways, but it doesn't help to make such absurd comparisons to Jim Crow. People just think you're crazy. And then I crossed the street, hopped on the bus, headed to my new job as director of the Racial Justice Project for the ACLU. Well, when I joined the ACLU, I assumed that our criminal justice system had problems of racial bias, much in the same way that all institutions in our society are infected to some degree or another with problems associated with conscious or unconscious bias and stereotyping. And so I assumed that it was my job to join together with other advocates to try to root out racial bias wherever and whenever it might rear its ugly head in the criminal justice system. But by the time I left the ACLU, I had come to realize that I was just dead wrong about our criminal justice system. It's not just another institution in our society infected with some degree of bias, but a different beast entirely. The activists that posted that sign on the telephone pole weren't crazy, nor were the smattering of lawyers and activists around the country that were beginning to connect the dots between mass incarceration and earlier forms of racial and social control. Quite belatedly, I came to see that our criminal justice system now does function much more like a system of racial and social control than a system of crime prevention and control. Millions of children in the United States today grow up believing that they too one day will go to jail. In our most segregated, ghettoized communities in the United States, young people are shuttled from decrepit, underfunded schools to these brand new high-tech prisons. They're targeted at young ages, often before they're old enough to vote, stopped, frisked, searched, interrogated about who they are, where they're going if they are headed home with nothing but Skittles in their hand. Stopped, frisked, searched, and when they're arrested, they're typically arrested for a relatively minor, non-violent, often drug-related offense, the very sorts of crimes that occur with roughly equal frequency in middle-class white communities or on college campuses, but go largely ignored. They're arrested, swept in, branded criminals and felons, and then ushered into a permanent second-class status, a status from which they will never escape. And this is happening to people by the millions in this country. Today, there are more African American adults under correctional control, in prison or jail, on probation or parole, than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began. As of 2004, more black men were denied the right to vote than in 1870, the year the 15th Amendment was ratified, prohibiting laws that explicitly deny the right to vote on the basis of race. Now, of course, during the Jim Crow era, poll taxes and literacy tests operated to keep black folks from the polls. Well, today, felon disenfranchisement laws in many states now accomplish what poll taxes and literacy tests ultimately could not. Now, this isn't a phenomenon that just affects some small segment of the African American community. To the contrary, in many large urban areas today, more than half of working age African American men now have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. These men are part of a growing undercaste, not class, caste, a group of people defined largely by race, relegated to a permanent second-class status by law.